Relics, whether they're for your supports, your debuffers, or your DPSs, I think a lot of individuals have a bit of a confusing instance in regards to whether or not you're keeping a relic set, whether or not you're going for a relic set, especially since I think many of us are expecting that triple relic drop event from SU and from the normal relic domains. And so the big question will be, what do I farm? Because even if we're solely focusing down on just Caverns of Corrosion, there are a lot of options. And yes, you can go for the resin efficient option, which would be something like Longevous and Messenger, but I think a lot of individuals are confused as to if that's even worth it. Because there are some extremely good sets. I will say from a basic standpoint of, if you could always maximize the set bonuses, Longevous, Pioneer of Dead Divers, and the Quantum set are extremely good. But they're not really paired with sets you're using very often. You're not going to be using the Guard set. Many of you won't use this Break Effect set because it's just a more damage-oriented variation of the Speed set. So let's delve in depth. For your supports, most of the time your support's only going to care about getting their burst up. For your healers, that means essentially just maximizing their speed. In most circumstances, you just want energy rope, and then everything else can be everything else can be something that either maximizes their own healing abilities or in some cases defense, because some individuals like Pella, for example, aren't dealing that much damage, so you can just go for a defense sphere. But in most cases, all you care about is speed and then a main set they scale with, whether that's outgoing healing or defense percentage if they give you a shield. This means that in most cases, you are only going for speed as a desired substat or effect resistance. Break effect, effect hit rate, attack percentage, none of that matters. Effect resistance is your chance to resist a debuff, and if your character's supports, I recommend solely focusing down on speed and effect res. HP and def are useful on these characters because they aren't dealing damage anyway. Most of the time, for the vast majority of you, your sub DPSs or your supports aren't going to be dealing a lot of damage. Your Pella isn't going to be geared out to dish out a ton of damage. Your Pella is solely there to add a debuff. Now, this can change in the event that you're gearing out a character like Silverwolf, for example, to be a sub DPS. But in that instance, it requires something like E2 to really get max value out of it, and that will require changing the set over to the Quantum set itself. But we will get to that later on. And so in regards to any supportive character, I'd say don't focus as much on double crit. I think a lot of individuals do kind of have this mindset where, oh, it has double crit, I could use that on X character or in the future. For instance, the guard pieces. These are some of my guard pieces. They aren't being used by anybody. Because they have double crit, they're, in theory, very nice. But I kind of have to have them be in a position to where they're not only better than the alternative sets I have, but subsequently, the overall stats I'm getting from these as substats overtake the value of a 2-piece, or even a 4-piece for some characters, making them really good for supports. So then, let's talk about DPSs. Whether they're your DOT characters, whether they're your normal elemental DPS, it doesn't matter. What should you be looking for on them? Well, in Acheron's case in particular, crit rate, crit damage, attack percentage, and I can even say break effect aren't that bad. Acheron's all-type resistance ignore does mean that she can occasionally break the enemy's weakness, or toughness bar. In those instances, the break effect isn't that bad. Now, I understand it's not a substat many of you want. Many of you would prefer it to roll all into crit or attack, but don't consider break effect bad. In regards to should you be farming out this set or like her Simulated Universe set, please keep in mind that you can always convert stuff into crit value and overall stats. 12% attack versus 12 crit rates. That would be 24 CV and 12% attack. Now, in that instance, I'd have to comb through these relic sets and the pieces I'm specifically using and add, okay, 11.6 crit rate plus 12. What I'm getting there is, in addition to all of these, would be 29.7 crit rates. If I'm using this piece, factoring in the 12 crit rate I get here, and then factoring in this crit rate, that's 29.7. So at that point, yes, this set has a nice bonus. But if I'm looking at other relics and I'm deciding, is it really worth it? I have to look at any of my other pieces. Well, this Inert Salsoto piece. I'm not getting the passive, but I am getting 8.7 crit rate here, 5.8 crit damage there, and then 11.6 and 6.4 here. As opposed to solely focusing down on the crit rates, you can convert it to CV, which CV is just crit rate times 2 plus crit damage, or just crit damage at its face value. So the CV of that crit damage is 6.4. But if looking at the CV of the crit rate, which is 11.6 crit rate, that's times 2, that's 23.2 CV. Adding that on to the 6.4, this is 29.6 CV in this piece alone. So in that instance, if you're looking at your SU sets and you're like, this one's bad, please keep in mind that it's all dependent on can the substat overtake the set bonus. You can run Rainbow. I think a lot of individuals get solely focused down on the fact of, oh my god, a set bonus is very nice, rather than is the set bonus paired with good set substats. No, please don't use it then. In Acheron's case, me using this over something like Inert Salsoto or Space Link Station or even Izumo, which is our ideal set, is like 5% difference, but that's with optimal substats. If, of course, every subset or every relic you have is equal in the exact same subset distribution, then yes, a signature set is going to be better. Using will be great, or inert will be great if all the subsets were equal, but they're not. And so in that instance, go for the one you have the better subsets in. The same thing applies with general relic set, Caverns of Corrosion. Now, of course, this is just aggro in particular. What about the more premier sets? I.e. any quantum character wanting the quantum set. I'm going to be honest with you, it's okay. The quantum set itself is really good. Defense down / defense ignore is wonderful. But if looking at the quantum characters in particular, Seely's Light Cone doesn't provide her with any ability to ignore or remove defense. If we're looking at the defensive or quantum roster for Mono Quantum, it would be Seely, Sparkle, Silverwolf, and Fu Xuan. Now, Fu Xuan and Sparkle at E0 don't have any capacity to ignore or reduce defense. Now Sparkle E2 does, and so the quantum set gets more value out of that, but you primarily are using her with SW. The same reason you'd want someone like Acheron to be paired with Impella is for the def down. And the same reason why you wouldn't use Acheron on the quantum set with both of these characters is because you would overcap on the defense down, so it loses value. Silverwolf makes the quantum set extremely good for that specific team, but if Silverwolf did not have the ability to reduce defense whether in her ultimate or in her skill, or basic or whatever, you could run anything else and arguably get better results. I think that a lot of people focus on the strict def down or def ignore of anything and say, oh yeah, it's really good. And don't get me wrong, the quantum set is amazing when it's working. But the only reason the second half of this passive works is because you're always pairing mono quantum teams with SW, and so you're always getting that quantum weakness. But remember, you're only getting that additional quantum weakness or that additional 10% def ignore against one enemy because it's only implanting it against one enemy. So please keep in mind that although that quantum set is great for quantum characters, many of you don't actually need it, and you could make a case for just going for subsets alone. For instance, in Seely's case, let's say hypothetically we're pairing her with SW, Sparkle, and Fu Xuan. She's getting a bunch of base stats. She's using the mono quantum set, and let's say it's against a quantum weak enemy. Well, then compared to a non-4-piece set, her best option as a 2-piece combination would be Pioneer of Dead Divers and 2-piece quantum set. Now mind you, this is against a quantum weak enemy. Against a quantum weak enemy, the quantum set is 5% better than the 2-piece combination I just mentioned. If the enemy is not quantum weak, then this whole 4-piece here is paired pretty much identically with the 2-piece combination of this plus Dead Waters. And you can go for 2-piece combination of this plus Musketeers, or full Musketeers. Once again, it is a 5 to 6% stat difference. And so a lot of individuals are solely focusing down on the def shred / def ignore, which is solely dependent on either the enemy having a natural resistance or W. And in the instances where SW applies that, you're only getting about 5% more damage out of the set. In those circumstances, I would say, hey, I know you really like this set, but don't solely focus it down. You can get a lot of value out of it, sure, but that value is restricted in those instances. Now, if as you implanted quantum weakness across the board to a bunch of enemies, I could see you making a case for, yeah, this is great. But in Seely's case in particular, you are trying to get Seely to implant a quantum, get Silverwolf to implant a quantum weakness on one enemy, use Seely to damage that enemy and kill it, and then somehow get Silverwolf to implant it on the next enemy, so that way Seely has the damage bonus, the defense ignore on that specific enemy, which you can do. But I understand overall, this isn't exactly something that many individuals, I think, are informed on. Like, this isn't, me saying, yeah, your relics are shit. This is me more so saying, your relics can kind of have more leeway. And in Genshin, you have plus 20s. So in HSR, you're missing, for the entire time, one additional subset roll. I think people get into the mindset with like, oh, well, this needs to only roll into crit rate crit damage because the other stats aren't that useful. Well, if you do that, you're never really going to improve your characters because you're solely focusing down on getting them to roll into a bunch of good substats. You could have a bad relic. Like, I'm gonna find one here. You could have a relic like this. One that is very, very poor. Like, I'm not gonna use this on any of my DPSs, but it's on Yukong right now. And use that as a baseline to improve. But in those instances, you are solely focused on getting it to have enough rolls or enough of one subset that you're looking for to say it is better than. Like speed, like crit damage, it doesn't matter. But please, please, just run Rainbow because most times it is not that bad. If you're looking at Clara and you're like, wow, her physical set is really good, you could run Longevous. You could make a case for running Longevous on Clara in getting the same value because Longevous gives you 16 crit rate. Clara does not have any crit in her traces, so just give her Blades pieces, minus the HP percent obviously. Jing Liu has no dedicated set that is amazing for her. She just go 2-piece combination, or go Rainbow on any of your characters. Sparkle, if you need to reach 160 speed, go Rainbow. Mine is 162 at 2-piece combinations. I understand that some sets are great, but you don't need to build out every character as a DPS. You don't need to have broken heal on everybody. What you need is just good substats first, and then you can try prioritizing a set bonus at a later date. If you're wondering what set bonuses to participate in or prioritize, you can go for the speed set because it's very universally applicable, or the guard set because the damage bonus or damage reduction is nice. Messenger is always valuable, but please, stop trying to find perfect relics. You're just not going to build out all your characters, and Rainbow honestly isn't that bad, especially if the substats are far better than you running a specific signature set. Either way, I'm a HoYoverse simp. I'm a Silverwool simp. Subscribe if you agree. I'll see you next time.